Commander Zara Voss stood at the view screen of Station Chrono 7, watching the human ship drift slowly into the docking bay. Her purple scales caught the light from the overhead panels as she moved. The ship looked damaged and old. Burn marks covered its hull. These humans were not warriors. They were just people running from something that Zara had fought in 12 battles for the Caltharian Empire. Each victory brought her more honor. Each enemy she defeated made her stronger. The Empire taught its soldiers that feelings made them weak. Love was a disease that made good fighters into dead ones. Zara believed this with all her heart. The humans were different from other races the Empire had captured. Most aliens begged for mercy or tried to fight back. These humans did neither. They just looked tired and sad. Zara did not understand why. This bothered her. She walked through the halls of the station. Her boots made sharp sounds on the metal floors. Other Caltharian officers moved out of her way. They knew her reputation. She was the one who made the hard choices. She was the one who never showed weakness. The detention center held 300 humans. Men, women, and children sat in small groups. Some talked quietly. Others just stared at the walls. The smell of fear was thick in the air, but it was different from other prisoners. This fear was mixed with something else. Hope maybe Captain Jake Morrison was brought to her office in chains. He was tall for a human, with brown hair and tired eyes. Most prisoners shook when they saw her. Jake just looked at her with calm interest. This made Zara angry, though she did not know why. "State your name and rank," she said in the common trade language all species used. "Captain Jake Morrison, formerly of the Earth Colonial Fleet," he replied. His voice was steady. "Your ship was found in Caltharian space without permission. This is an act of war." Jake shook his head slowly. "We were running from raiders. Our home colony was destroyed. We're refugees, not soldiers." Zara had heard this story before from other species. Everyone claimed to be innocent. Everyone had excuses. But something in Jake's voice made her pause. He was not lying. She could tell. "Where were you going?" she asked. "Anywhere safe. We have families on that ship. Children, pregnant women. We just wanted to find a place to live in peace." The word pregnant stuck in Zara's mind. The Caltharian Empire did not allow weakness. Pregnant females were kept separate from males until their children were born. Then the children were taken to training centers. Families were not important. Only the Empire mattered. "Your people will be processed and sent to work camps," Zara said. It was standard procedure. Nothing personal. Jake's calm face changed for the first time. Pain crossed his features like a shadow. "My wife Lisa is 8 months pregnant. The stress of capture might hurt her, and the baby. Please, I'm asking for basic medical care. Nothing more. The Empire provides what is necessary for survival. Nothing more. She's just a girl, barely 22 years old. This is her first child. Our first child." Jake's voice broke slightly. "I know you probably think we're weak for caring about family, but that baby is our whole world." Zara felt something strange in her chest, a tightness she had never experienced before. She pushed it away. Emotions were dangerous. They clouded judgment. "Family attachments are inefficient," she said. "The Empire teaches us that individual bonds weaken the whole." Jake looked at her with something like pity. "Then the Empire has never known real strength. I would die for my wife and child without hesitation. That kind of love doesn't make you weak. It makes you capable of anything." After the interview, Zara went to her private quarters. She tried to focus on her reports, but Jake's words kept returning to her thoughts. Love makes you capable of anything. What did that mean? Love was just chemicals in the brain. Biology playing tricks to ensure species survival. The Empire had explained this to her as a child. She accessed the prisoner files on her computer. Lisa Morrison's medical record appeared on screen. Age 22. Pregnant with first child. Due date in 4 weeks. High stress levels detected during processing. Recommended for standard prenatal care. The photo showed a young woman with blonde hair and green eyes. She was smiling in the picture. It must have been taken before the raiders attacked their home. Before they became refugees. Before they were captured. Zara stared at the image for a long time. She tried to understand what she was feeling, but her training had no words for it. The Empire had removed such concepts from their language generations ago. The next morning, she made her rounds through the detention center. Most prisoners barely looked up when she passed. But in one section, she heard quiet singing. A woman's voice, soft and gentle. The song was in a human language she did not recognize, but the melody was beautiful. She followed the sound to cell. Block 7. Lisa Morrison sat on a simple cot, her hands resting on her swollen belly. She was singing to her unborn child. Jake sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. Other prisoners had gathered close to listen. Children sat cross-legged on the floor. Adults leaned against the walls. All of them were smiling. The song ended, and Lisa looked up. Her eyes met Zara's through the security glass. For a moment, neither woman moved. Then Lisa nodded slightly, a greeting between mothers, though Zara had never been one. That night, Zara dreamed of purple-scaled children learning to sing. She woke confused and disturbed. Caltharians did not sing. They had no use for music. Art was waste of time that could be spent training for battle. But the melody from Lisa's song stayed with her all day. And despite her best efforts, she found herself humming it while she worked. The alarm cut through the night like a knife. Zara woke instantly, her training taking over before her mind was fully alert. Red lights flashed in her quarters. The computer voice spoke in calm Caltharian tones about a medical emergency in detention. Block 7. She dressed quickly and ran through the corridors. Other officers were already moving toward the medical bay. Dr. Kempf, the station's chief medical officer, met her at the entrance. His scaled face showed worry, which was unusual. For a Caltharian, "What is the situation?" Zara asked. "The human female, Lisa Morrison. She has gone into labor 3 weeks early. The automated systems cannot adapt to human biology. We have no experience with human births." Zara felt that strange tightness in her chest again. What are the possible outcomes? Dr. Kent's voice was clinical. Both mother and child will likely die without proper intervention. A birth canal is too narrow. The child is in the wrong position. Human females are poorly designed for reproduction. Through the observation window, Zara could see into the medical bay. Lisa lay on the examination table, her face twisted in. Pain. Jake stood beside her, holding her hand through the restraint field. His face was pale with fear. 2 human women from the detention center had been brought in to help, but they looked lost and frightened. Standard protocol requires no intervention with prisoner medical issues beyond basic life support, Dr. Kent said. Shall I inform the family that we will make the patient comfortable until natural conclusion? Zara watched Lisa struggle through another contraction. The young woman's body shook with effort. Sweat covered her face, but her eyes remained focused and determined. She was fighting for her child's life with everything she had. Commander? Dr. Kent was waiting for orders. Jake pressed his face against the containment field. He was speaking to his wife, but Zara could not hear the words through the barrier. Whatever he said made Lisa nod and squeeze his hand tighter. Even in her pain, she smiled at him. Zara had seen many warriors die. In battle, she had watched them fight impossible odds with courage and honor. But she had never seen anything like the strength Lisa Morrison showed now. This was not the weakness the Empire taught about. This was pure will refusing to surrender. Dr. Kempf, Zara said quietly, "What would you need to save them both?" The doctor's eyes widened. "Commander, the regulations clearly state." "I asked what you would need, not what the regulations say." Dr. Kempf looked at his instruments. Advanced surgical tools, real-time biological monitoring, possibly emergency surgery if the child cannot be delivered naturally. It would take hours of intensive work. And even then, success is not guaranteed. Do it. Commander, I must remind you that prisoners are expendable resources. The time and materials required. Zara turned to face him fully. Her violet eyes held a coldness that made him step back. "I said do it. Save them both. Use whatever resources are necessary." Dr. Kempf nodded quickly and began calling for equipment. Medical robots rolled into the bay carrying surgical tools and monitoring devices. The sterile white room filled with activity as technicians prepared for an operation they had never performed before. Zara remained at the observation window. Lisa's contractions were getting stronger and closer together. The human women who had been brought to help moved around the bed, offering comfort and encouragement. They spoke in gentle voices, telling Lisa she was strong, that everything would be all right. This was something else the Empire had bred out of its people. Caltharians did not comfort each other during pain. Pain was weakness leaving the body. It should be endured in silence and solitude, but these humans surrounded their friend with love and support. They held her hands. They wiped her face with cool cloths. They sang the same gentle song Zara had heard Lisa singing days before. Their voices blended together in harmony that made the medical bay feel warm despite the cold metal walls. Never left his wife's side. The restraint field prevented him from touching her directly, but he pressed his hands against the barrier where she could see them. He talked to her constantly, telling her how proud he was, how much he loved her, how their baby was going to be beautiful and strong. Hours passed. Dr. Kempf worked with careful precision, using tools designed for Caltharian physiology on a completely different species. He muttered to himself in their native language, calculating and adjusting constantly. Medical displays showed Lisa's vital signs fluctuating wildly. "The child is in distress," Dr. Kempf announced. "Heart rate dropping. I may need to perform emergency surgery." Jake's face went white. "Will she survive surgery?" "I do not know. Human surgical tolerance is unknown to me." Lisa opened her eyes and looked directly at her husband. "Jake, if you have to choose, save the baby. Promise me." "No, I won't promise that." "You're both going to be fine. Please, promise me." Jake shook his head. Tears ran down his face, the first time Zara had seen a male of any species cry. "I can't live without you. Either both of you make it, or neither of us does." "That's not fair to her," Lisa whispered, placing her hands on her belly. "She deserves a chance to live." "She?" Dr. Kempf looked up from his instruments. "You know the child's gender?" Lisa smiled through her pain. "A mother knows. Her name is Emma. Emma Morrison. She's going to grow up to be someone important. I can feel it." Another contraction hit, stronger than before. Lisa screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the medical bay. But she did not give up. She kept pushing, kept fighting, kept believing her daughter would survive. Zara found herself pressing her own hands against the observation window. Something was happening inside her that she could not control or understand. Her chest felt tight. Her breathing was shallow. These humans were showing her something her entire civilization had forgotten. They were showing her what it meant to love someone more than yourself. "Commander," Dr. Kempf called out, "the child is coming. But there are complications. The cord is wrapped around the neck. I need to act quickly. Zara watched the doctor work with instruments that looked far too large for something so delicate. Lisa pushed with everything she had left. Jake encouraged her with words of love and hope. The other human women held vigil like ancient priests, guarding something sacred. And in that moment, Zara understood why the Empire feared human emotion. It was not weakness. It was power beyond measure. The first sound Emma Morrison made was a cry that filled the medical bay with life. It was high and strong, the voice of someone who had fought hard to enter the world and won. Dr. Kent held the tiny human carefully, his large-scaled hands surprisingly gentle around the small pink form. "The child lives," he announced, his voice filled with amazement. "She is small, but appears healthy." Lisa collapsed back against the medical table, exhausted but smiling. Tears of joy ran down her face as she reached toward her daughter. Jake pressed against the containment field, trying to get closer to his family. His own tears fell freely now, and he made no attempt to hide them. Dr. Kempf cleaned the baby with practiced efficiency, though Zara could see his movements were uncertain. He had delivered Caltharian young before, but never something so fragile. And small? Emma's tiny fists waved in the air, as if she was angry about being disturbed. Her eyes were tightly closed, but her cries were strong and demanding. "She has good lungs," one of the human women said with a laugh. "Listen to her telling us exactly what she thinks about all this." "Just like her mother," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion, stubborn from the very first moment. Dr. Kempf wrapped Emma in a clean medical cloth and moved toward the containment field. The barrier allowed him to pass the baby through to her father's waiting hands. The moment Jake held his daughter, everything in the room seemed to stop. Even Emma's crying quieted as she settled against her father's chest. Zara watched from the observation window as Jake gazed down at his child with wonder. His face showed pure love, the kind of expression she had never seen on any Caltharian face. He spoke to Emma in soft tones, telling her how beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how proud her mother was. "She's perfect," Jake whispered too. "Lisa, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and the most beautiful eyes I've ever seen." Lisa tried to sit up to see her daughter better. "What color are her eyes?" "Dark blue, like yours were when you were young." "She's going to be as beautiful as her mother." Emma opened her eyes at the sound of her parents' voices. She seemed to study their faces with serious concentration, as if she was trying to memorize them. When Jake touched her tiny hand with his finger, she grasped it with surprising strength. "Look at that grip," Jake said with amazement. "She's going to be strong." Dr. Kempf finished his medical procedures on Lisa and declared her stable. The birth had been difficult, but both mother and child were healthy. The other human women helped move Lisa to a recovery bed where she could hold her daughter properly. Zara continued to watch from the observation deck. She told herself she was ensuring proper security protocols were followed. But the truth was, she could not look away from the family. There was something about the way they looked at each other that made her chest feel strange. When Emma was placed in her mother's arms, for the first time, the baby immediately stopped fussing. She seemed to recognize Lisa's voice and scent. Lisa began to sing the same gentle song Zara had heard before, and Emma's eyes grew heavy with sleep. "She knows you're her mama," Jake said softly. "Look how peaceful she is. She's been listening." "To me sing for months," Lisa replied. "This isn't new to her. She's just finally getting to see who the voice belongs to." Jake looked up toward the observation window. His eyes found Zara's through the glass, and he mouthed the words, "Thank you," with deep sincerity. The gesture surprised her. She had not expected gratitude from a prisoner. Hours later, Zara returned to her quarters, but she could not focus on her reports. Her mind kept returning to the scene in the medical bay. The way Jake had held his daughter. The joy on Lisa's face. The sound of Emma's first cry. These images would not leave her thoughts. She tried to understand what she was feeling. The Empire had taught her that attachment led to weakness. But what she had witnessed did not look weak. Jake and Lisa had shown incredible strength during the birth. Their love for each other and their child had given them power to endure pain and fear. Late that night, Zara found herself walking back toward the medical bay. She told herself she was conducting a routine security check, but her feet carried her directly to the recovery room where the Morrison family was resting. Lisa was sleeping, still exhausted from the birth. Jake sat in a chair beside her bed, holding Emma against his chest. The baby was awake, her dark eyes alert and curious. She seemed to be studying everything around her with intense interest. When Emma began to cry, Jake rocked her gently, but she would not be comforted. Lisa stirred, but was clearly too weak to wake fully. Jake looked frustrated and worried. He had no experience with babies, and his daughter's distress was causing him obvious pain. Without thinking about regulations or protocols, Zara entered the recovery room. Jake looked up in surprise, unsure whether to be afraid or hopeful. Zara approached slowly, her hands visible and empty. "May I?" she asked quietly, gesturing toward the baby. Jake hesitated for a moment, then carefully placed Emma in Zara's arms. The moment the baby was against her chest, something extraordinary happened. Emma's crying stopped immediately. She looked up at Zara with wide, trusting eyes and made a small sound of contentment. Zara felt as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. This tiny human, barely hours old, was looking at her without fear or judgment. Emma's small hand reached up and touched Zara's scaled cheek with gentle curiosity. The baby's touch was warm and soft, completely different from any sensation Zara had ever experienced. "She likes you," Jake said softly, his voice filled with wonder. "I've never seen her so calm with a stranger. Perhaps she recognizes your voice," Lisa said, opening her eyes slightly. "You saved our lives. Maybe she knows you're a friend." Emma made another small sound and grasped Zara's finger with her tiny hand. The grip was strong and determined, just as Jake had said. But there was also trust in that grasp, a complete faith that this strange purple-scaled being would keep her safe. Zara looked down into Emma's eyes and felt something break open inside her chest. It was like a dam bursting, releasing feelings she had never known existed. This small human baby was showing her what her own people had lost centuries ago, the capacity for pure, unconditional love. "She's beautiful," Zara whispered, surprising herself by speaking aloud. "Would you like to sit down?" Jake asked. "You look like you might need to." Zara nodded and carefully settled into a chair, still, holding Emma close. The baby seemed perfectly content in her arms, making small happy sounds and studying Zara's face with intense concentration. It was as if Emma was trying to memorize every detail. For the first time in her adult life, Commander Zara Voss felt truly at peace. Admiral Cronax arrived at Station Chrono 7 3 days after Emma Morrison was born. His ship, the Imperial Fist, docked with the kind of precision that showed decades of military experience. Zara watched from her office window as Calfarian soldiers marched through the docking bay in perfect formation. Their purple scales gleamed under the station lights, and their weapons were held at exactly the right angle. She knew why the Admiral had come. Reports of her behavior had reached the high command. Someone had told them about her unusual interest in the human prisoners. Someone had mentioned the medical resources she had authorized for the birth. In the Calfarian Empire, such actions required explanation. Admiral Cronax was an old warrior, covered in battle scars that told the story of 40 years of service. His eyes were the pale yellow of someone who had seen too much death and felt nothing about it anymore. When he entered Zara's office, he did not bother with pleasantries. "Commander Voss," he said in their native tongue, "I have come to investigate reports of unusual conduct regarding the human prisoners." "What specific conduct requires investigation?" Zara asked, though she already knew the answer. "You authorized extensive medical resources for a prisoner Earth. You personally observed the procedure for hours. You have been seen entering the detention areas during off-duty time. Explain these actions." Zara had prepared for this moment, but now that it was here, she found the words difficult to speak. The human female went into premature labor. Standard medical protocols would have resulted in the death of both mother and child. I determined that preserving the specimens would serve the Empire's research interests. Admiral Krunix studied her face carefully. He had known her since she was a young officer, fresh from the military academy. He had watched her rise through the ranks by making hard decisions without hesitation. What he saw now in her expression was something he had never seen before. "Research interests," he repeated slowly. "Is that your official explanation for this?" "Behavior? Yes, Admiral. I see." He activated his portable computer and displayed a document on her desk screen. "Then you will have no difficulty implementing these new orders, which arrived this morning from High Command." Zara read the orders with growing horror. The human prisoners were to be separated immediately. Adult males would be sent to mining colonies in the Outer Rim. Adult females would go to agricultural work camps in different sectors. Children over 5 would begin military conditioning programs. And baby Emma Morrison would be transferred to the Central Research Institute for Psychological Development Studies. The infant will be raised in complete isolation from human contact, Admiral Krunix explained. Scientists want to study how human emotional development occurs without familial bonds. They believe this knowledge will help us better control future human populations. Zara's hands clenched into fists under her desk. The child is barely 3 days old. Separation from her parents could kill her. That is also useful data. Human infants who cannot survive without emotional attachment are weak specimens. The Empire has no use for weakness. And if she does survive, what then? Admiral Krunix's pale eyes showed no emotion. She will be raised as a Caltharian, trained to serve the Empire. Her human genetics will be useful for infiltration missions. When she reaches maturity, a human who thinks like a Caltharian could be very valuable. Zara thought of Emma's trusting eyes, of the way she had grasped her finger with such tiny strength. The idea of that beautiful child being raised without love, trained to be a weapon, made something violent rise in her chest. "When do the transfers begin?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Tomorrow morning. Transport ships are already en route. I wanted to observe the operation personally to ensure no further irregularities occur." That evening, Zara walked through the detention center one last time. The human prisoners sensed something was wrong. They gathered in small groups, speaking in worried whispers. Parents held their children closer. Couples clung to each other's hands. In the medical bay, the Morrison family was unaware of what tomorrow would bring. Lisa was nursing Emma while Jake read to them from a small book he had somehow kept hidden during their capture. It was a collection of human poetry, and his voice was gentle as he shared the words. Emma was growing stronger each day. Her cries were louder, her movements more coordinated. She spent long periods awake, studying the world around her with intelligent eyes. When Zara approached their bed, the baby turned toward her voice with recognition. "Commander," Jake said, looking up from his book. "We haven't seen you since yesterday. Is everything all right?" Zara wanted to tell them the truth, but the words stuck in her throat. How could she explain that tomorrow their family would be torn apart forever? How could she tell them that their daughter would be raised as an enemy of her own species? I wanted to check on Emma's progress, she said instead. Lisa smiled and held the baby up so Zara could see her better. She's doing wonderfully. Dr. Kent says she's gaining weight normally, and she's already starting to focus on faces. As if to prove her mother's point, Emma stared directly at Zara with serious concentration. Her tiny hand reached toward the Calfarian officer, making grasping motions in the air. She remembers you, Jake said with amazement. Look how she reaches for you. Zara took Emma in her arms, and the baby immediately settled against her chest with a contented sigh. The tiny human felt so fragile, so dependent on the care of others. The idea of her being raised in a sterile laboratory, studied like a specimen, was unbearable. Commander, Lisa said softly. Is something wrong? You look upset. Zara realized that tears were running down her scaled cheeks. She had not cried since childhood, and not even known she still possessed the ability. But holding Emma, while knowing what would happen to her, was breaking something inside that she had thought was permanently hardened. I am fine, she lied, just tired from long duty shifts. But she was not fine. For the first time in her adult life, Commander Zara Voss was being torn apart by emotions she could barely understand. Love and duty were at war inside her, and she did not know which would win. That night, she sat in her quarters staring at the transport schedules on her computer. Ships would arrive at 0800 hours. The separation process would begin immediately. By 1200 hours, the Morrison family would be scattered across the galaxy, never to see each other again, unless she did something to stop it. The thought came unbidden, and she tried to push it away. But it kept returning, growing stronger each time. She could warn them. She could help them escape. She could choose love over duty. But such a choice would make her a traitor to the empire that had raised her. It would mean giving up everything she had ever known or worked for. It would mean running for the rest of her life, hunted by her own people. Zara looked out her window at the stars beyond the station. Somewhere out there were human colonies where Emma could grow up free, where she could learn to sing like her, mother and read poetry like her father, where she could become whatever she chose to be instead of what others forced her to become. The choice was impossible. But as she thought of Emma's trusting eyes and tiny grasping hand, Zara realized she had already made it. At 0300 hours, when the station's artificial night was deepest, Zara moved through the corridors like a shadow. Her commander's access codes opened every door without question. Her knowledge of guard rotations let her avoid detection. In 30 minutes, the transport ships would arrive, and the separation would begin. She had 30 minutes to betray everything she had ever believed in. The detention center was quiet, except for the soft sounds of sleeping humans. Zara made her way to the Morrison family's cell, where Jake sat awake holding Emma while Lisa slept. He looked up in surprise when she entered. Then his expression changed to fear as he saw the weapons and supplies she carried. "Commander, what's happening?" he whispered, not wanting to wake his wife. "Transport ships arrive in 30 minutes. They're going to separate your family permanently. Emma will be taken to a research facility where she be raised in isolation and trained as a weapon against her own species." Jake's face went white. "No, that can't happen. There has to be something we can do." "There is." Zara set down a bag containing stolen food supplies and navigation equipment. "I'm going to get you off this station. All of you. You're helping." "U.S. escape? Why would you risk that?" Zara looked down at Emma, who was awake and watching her with bright, curious eyes. A baby made a small, happy sound when she saw her, reaching up with tiny hands. "Because some things are more important than duty." Lisa woke as they prepared to leave. When Jake quickly explained what was happening, she gathered their few possessions without question. Her hands shook as she dressed Emma in the warmest clothes. They had, but her voice remained steady as she whispered comfort to her daughter. "Where will we go?" Lisa asked as they moved through the empty corridors. "There's a small transport ship in Docking Bay 7. It has enough fuel to reach the edge of Caltharian space. From there, you'll have to find your own way to human territory." They reached the docking bay without being seen. The ship Zara had chosen was old but reliable, designed for long-range transport missions. She quickly activated the systems and began the launch sequence while Jake and Lisa secured themselves in the passenger area. "Commander," Jake said as the ship's engines warmed up, "come with us. You can't stay here after this. They'll know you helped us." Zara had not planned to go with them. Her intention had been to send them away and face the consequences of her choice. But as she looked at Emma in her mother's arms, she realized she could not bear to say goodbye. This small human family had become more important to her than her own life. "I don't know anything about human society," she said. "I would be a burden." "You saved our daughter's life," Lisa said firmly. "You're family now." Family doesn't abandon each other. The word family hit Zara like a physical blow. She had never had a family in the human sense. Caltharians were raised in group facilities, trained to serve the Empire rather than form individual bonds. But looking at the Morrisons, she began to understand what she had been missing her entire life. "A navigation system is set for human space," she said, making her decision. "But the journey will take days, and we'll be hunted every moment." "Then we better go," Jake said with a grin that reminded her why she had come to care about these impossible humans. The transport ship, Defiant, lifted off from Station Kronos 7, just as the first Imperial transport arrived. Zara pushed the engines. Beyond safe limits, racing for the hyperspace jump point before Admiral Krennics realized what had happened. Behind them, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Admiral Krennics' voice filled the communication channels, ordering all ships to pursue the stolen transport. But Zara had a head start and 30 years of tactical training. She knew how to disappear. The hyperspace jump felt like falling into starlight. One moment they were racing through normal space, with Imperial ships closing behind them. The next, they were traveling faster than light toward the unknown territories, beyond Caltharian control in the passenger area. Emma began to cry. The stress of the escape and the strange sensations of hyperspace had frightened her. Lisa tried to comfort her, but the baby would not settle. Jake looked helpless, unsure how to calm his daughter. "May I?" Zara asked, leaving the pilot's controls. On automatic the moment she took Emma in her arms, the baby's crying stopped. Emma looked up at her rescuer with complete trust, making the small, contented sounds that meant she felt safe. Zara felt that familiar warmth spread through her chest, the feeling she was beginning to recognize as love. "She knows you're the one who saved us," Lisa said softly. "She'll never forget that." The journey to human space took 6 days. Imperial ships hunted them across 3 star systems, but Zara's knowledge of Caltharian tactics kept them always one step ahead. During the long hours in hyperspace, she learned what it meant to be part of a human family. Jake taught her to hold Emma properly, to recognize the different sounds she made when she was hungry or tired or just wanted attention. Lisa showed her the songs that calmed the baby and the stories that made her smile. They shared their food with her, included her in their conversations, and treated her as if she had always belonged with them. Most importantly, they trusted her completely with their daughter. When Emma was fussy, they handed her to Zara without hesitation. When the baby needed comfort, she often settled better in Zara's scaled arms than anywhere else. The tiny human seemed to have adopted the Caltharian warrior as a second mother. On the 7th day, they reached the edge of human territory. A patrol fleet of Earth colonial vessels intercepted them, weapons ready until Jake identified himself. When the human officers learned what had happened, they provided escort to the nearest colony world. Hope was a frontier planet where refugees from across the galaxy had built a new life together. Humans, Centaurians,